Today we're talking running and mental health. If you've followed any of our videos before, you'll know that I have a personal journey with mental health and depression. Very often I used to find running as an extra stress. I know for a lot of people, they find running as a stress reliever, and that it's really something that helps their mental health. Again, if you followed Coach Parry, you will know that we really drive the point that we don't really like you running every day. So that puts us in a bit of a conundrum, and we get a lot of pushback from people who say, well, I need to run every day because it helps my mental health. So first things first, let's look at why running helps with mental health. So in the 1980s, when running or jogging became quite the trend and the craze, a lot of the scientists thought that this runner's high came from endorphins. And very often it still gets referred to as that way, because what they found is when they measured sort of blood samples, is that they found that natural painkillers were elevated within those blood samples, and so they assumed that endorphins is what created this runner's high.
Another reason why running is great for mental health is because when we exercise and run in particular, the body produces endocannabinoids, which, you guessed it, are very similar in chemical structure to the cannabinoids that you know as marijuana. And these substances can cross the blood-brain barrier, and they give you that very calming, relaxed, euphoric feeling that you often get, or that people talk about as the afterglow when you run. So typically you need to do between 30 and 45 minutes of exercise for that effect to take place. But it's really the reason why a lot of people almost feel like they need that run to help them to de-stress, relax, and get over the end of their day. Many occupational therapists also really strongly recommend running as a great form of modulating or controlling anxiety, because we get a lot of biofeedback from our feet when they're in contact with the ground, and that rhythmic biofeedback and vibration that we get from running, that runs through our body, has a really good soothing and calming impact on anxiety. And psychologists have said that a lot of people that suffer with borderline anxiety that only comes out much later in life haven't realized that they suffer from anxiety, because throughout their life they've been able to modulate themselves very well by running on most days of the week.
So we all know running has got massive benefits to our mental health. However, like with anything, doing too much has got its risks. I'm going to hand over to Ntutu to get us started on the first risk we need to be careful of.
One of the dangers of running every day, even if it is good for you from a mental perspective, is that you're running the risk of increased injury. And in particular, it's about overuse injuries. So most of us actually can't handle a continuous loading every single day. And we need to be very careful about how much exercise we do. And it might be good for you to go out and feel the fresh air, but you're also going to take care of your body. And if your body breaks down, then it actually isn't of any value to you to be going out every single day. And so you need to be very, very careful and ensure that you're taking adequate recovery. And we also mustn't forget that a lot of the improvements that happen with you fitness-wise and strength-wise happen actually when you're resting. So if you aren't resting, you aren't allowing your body to go through that repair and recovery process.
The second risk we're going to chat about is under recovery. Now, Ntutu's already spoken about injuries and the risk of injuries involved with running every day. If we just sort of take that another step further and think about running every day and not allowing your body enough time to recover between training sessions puts the body under so much strain that it might force you to start picking up little niggles along the way, start picking up those injuries that Ntutu mentioned, and that then forces you to have to take a bit of a break. Whereas just taking a day between each training session, for example, is going to keep you well recovered, keep you fresh enough to be able to start that next training session and not risk any of those injury sides of things. The same really comes down to the performance aspect. Now, I know not everyone runs for performance basis. We're not all trying to run PBs or run marathons and that. And in particular in this scenario, when we're speaking about running for mental health, a lot of the time it really is just to feel a little bit better, get outside, get some fresh air. However, there is still an aspect where you know you might have your normal 5K route that you get out. Now you're running every day, you're not recovering well enough, you start feeling a little bit flat, potentially getting a little bit sick, not able to cover your normal 5K route, and you're running a little bit less. And then you start to wonder, well, you're almost falling into this little bit of a hole where you're going, what's happening? Why am I not getting my normal 5Ks? Why do I feel like I'm running so much slower? Why is it becoming more difficult to run than what it usually is, and I'm feeling good? So now it almost has this negative effect on, well, why are you doing this in the first place? You are going to get that benefit still. If you just give yourself a little bit of recovery, you'll feel better about yourself. When you do get out on those runs, you're feeling fresh. It doesn't feel like a burden, and you're going to know that you can continue with this for that mental health aspect a lot longer without any of those sort of risks of being under recovered.
One of the things that we need to always be aware of is that if we are using running to help us to cope with other mental health or high anxiety or stress related issues, it's very closely related to tipping over into being part of what we are struggling with and becoming an added crutch, or this feeling of we cannot do this or cope without running, and that then leads into us perhaps doing too much running, which brings out potential like Tutu and Dev have come through around injuries and under recovery and so forth, but also it can push us into a place where we start to struggle with things like relative energy deficiency syndrome. It can fuel into other addictions. It can be a auxiliary to things like anorexia and body dimorphism. So we really also do need to be aware that running is so good for so many things on so many levels, but like so many things in life, it can be abused, it can be misused and feed into the very thing that we are trying to help us against. And that can lead to quite dire health consequences in its extreme form. And I guess the most obvious example of that would be being on the scale of anorexia and ultimately leading into stress fractures and other very serious types of injuries, malnutrition that can end up with us being in hospital. So yeah, always just a small warning that as good as running can be for you, you do need to be a little bit careful that everything can lead into an extreme.
So while exercise can be a positive influence in your life, you've also got to be careful that it doesn't become almost like an added stress or a burden to you. So sometimes you've had a hard day at work, or you haven't slept very well, or you're just tired, or you're busy, and you get home and you think to yourself, oh, I've got to go out for another run. And it's there in the schedule, so you feel like you need to do it, but actually doing the run might stress you out a little bit more, and that's then going to start having negative mental effects to you and undoing all the mental benefits that you want from your exercise. And you end up feeling anxious about your runs, and it might lead to episodes where you actually now start not doing runs. And then when you miss a run, because you've decided that you need to run every single day, it actually ends up being as a bit of a negative feedback.
So now that we know the risks to running every day, what are some of the alternatives that we can do to running every day that'll still give you that mental health boost and those positive vibes? Walking is a really good option. Now, we talk about running, we like to give a little bit of time between that running to obviously mitigate any of those risks of performance and injury in that. But if you are someone that feels you need to get out, you need the fresh air, walking will still have a massive benefit without necessarily that high risk of training and putting your body under major demand. Now, talk about walking. If you've got a dog, take your dog for a walk. If it's walking down the road to go and grab a cup of coffee, that getting out is some light exercise. It's not necessarily a really high demand on the body. And even that light exercise, there has been evidence to prove that a walk around the block can still, Lindsay's spoken about the effects on cortisol and trying to eke out that cortisol from the system. Something as simple and as light as going for a walk will have a benefit in eking out some of that cortisol to the body. So get out. We're not saying you need to be cooped up inside in a sort of negative environment, but get out, go for a walk. It's light on the body. It often also acts as a little bit of a recovery tool. So you're also just sort of loosening the body up and limbering up a little bit from a training session you may have done the day before. So that walk will have multiple benefits to you. Get out, get that fresh air, and you're not putting yourself at any risk.
Cross training is a really great way for you to make sure that you're still getting your daily dose of exercise with removing the high impact, but still giving you access to those endocannabinoids so that you still get that runner's high, feeling good, relaxation that is associated with doing exercise. A lot of people though feel like they don't get that same level of sweat or sense of achievement once they've done that cross training. And really what's important to understand is that we don't always want to be pushing ourselves to get the type of aerobic adaptation that we're looking for that complements and doesn't work against our running goals. You actually want to be going in your aerobic zone, your zone 2, 75% of maximum, just to give you some idea of what that is. So it is fairly easy exercise, between 30 and 60 minutes in duration, and that really will be excellent for mental well-being and help to contribute towards the running goals that you've set yourself.
Another great alternative to running every day is hiking. I love hiking. I'm a massive fan of getting into the mountains and hiking for a couple of days. We're talking a bit more practically here though, something that you can do as opposed to running every day. A little bit different to what Dev was talking about with walking, right? So there's a clear differentiation between the two. Getting out for a walk is very, very effective. One of the things I love about hiking though is that it puts you in nature. So if you have access to some trails or a park nearby that you can utilize within the week, really getting out there and going for a nice long hike is such a great way to really be grounded to the earth and to be out in nature and also get some physical activity going as well.
At Coach Parry, we do have experience with people that either don't have any access to cross training or really, really need that modulation and calming effect that they get from running to help them managing their anxiety. And in a situation like that, when you have to run every day, when it's just really a critical part of your day to help you cope with everything else that's going on around you, we need to get creative with the load. Okay? What that really means is that we want to take the total load that you need to do to prepare for a certain event, or that is close to that line where we know that we're running into the risk of injury, and we really need to spread that out across the week. So instead of having hour 15, hour and a half, 2-hour runs in the week, for example, we'd have much shorter, maybe 30 to 45 minute runs, more regularly and consistency through the week, but we look to manage that load. Adding in some runs that have a lot of walking in them, for example, so that you're still getting some running, you're still getting the modulation, but we do make sure that we are allowing your body to recover so that we avoid all the risks of injury and overtraining. Running and mental health is something that's really close to home at Coach Parry. It's something that Shona has been working through, and if you want to see how she's dealing with it, you can watch this video now.